Next, let's see what the requirements are to connect to a DB2 server. If the connection is local, that is the DB2 client and DB2 server are on the same system. Then normally, there is no setup required. The information required to connect is added to the system local DB2 directories. At the time the create database command was executed, if the connection is remote, then you need to perform some setup at the server and some setup at the client at the server. You need to turn on the TCP IP listeners and specify the DB2 instance port they listen to. At the client, you need to add entries to the node and system directories. Let me show you how to perform this setup now. So, for the setup required at the server, you first need to turn on the TCP IP listeners using the command db2 set db2com equals TCP IP. So, after I issue this command, then TCP IP is set. So, let me show you how to run that command. You type db2 set db2com equals TCP IP. Enter the command as shown. No spaces are allowed before or after the equal sign, so I press enter. Now I can do a db2 set dash all, and you can confirm from here that the db2 registry variable has been set. Next, you need to specify the db2 instance port where the TCP IP listener will listen to. You do this with the command db2 update dbmcfg using either the port number, which in this case is 50000, or the server's name, which in this case is db2c underscore db2. If you want to use a server name, ensure the services file has a correct entry or mapping for this service name. The services like Linux is located in etc. services. On Windows, it's located in this directory that is shown here. So in that file, you should have an entry like this, db2 underscore db2, and then it maps to 50000. So let me show you how to do this from the command window. Issue the command db2 update dbmcfg using svc name 5000 and press enter. And then the update is successful. You can check the values by doing a db2 get dbmcfg and press enter. And then you can see the values set correctly to 50000. Now, if you wanted to use a server's name, you could issue the same command. Instead, a 50000, you type db2c underscore db2 and then press enter. And now the change has occurred. You can verify again that by doing a db2 get dbmc config. And now you can see svcce name is set to db2. Now, when you set the service name to a string, as mentioned before, you need to also have or verify that you have an entry in the services file with this same information. So let's take a look at the services file on Windows. I already have the services file shown here under the directory. Let's take a look at the contents of that file. Let me just quickly change the extension so I can quickly open it with Notepad, and then I go to the end. And I can see that I do have the string db2c underscore db2, and it maps to 50000. So if you had changed the svce name to something else, here instead of this, just make sure there is a corresponding string and mapping to the corresponding port that you want. So this a good, so I'm going to close this file and I'm just going to change the extension back to what it was, no extension. And now the setup required that the server is finished. You may also want to do a db2 stop and db2 start if you wish, or if things are not working, just to ensure that these settings have been correctly changed. Now let's talk about the setup required at the client. First, you need to create an entry in the node directory. This can be done with the catalog command that is shown here. Catalog TCP IP node my node. This is an arbitrary name. You can choose any name. Remote, then you specify either the host name or the IP address. In this case, it's myhost.ibm.com server. Here you specify 50000. This will be the port number. Or it can also be the service name. So whatever is presented here in different colors other than black represents variables that you need to input. The second command that is used to populate the system database directory is this command. Catalog database, then you specify the name or alias of your database. At node my node, so here is where you have to point to the previously created entry in the node directory. Note that these catalogs commands will not check the information that you entered is correct or not. So you can put invalid host names or numbers or database names. At the time you attempt to connect is when you click receive error connection messages. Now when you connect from your client application to your database server, the application will probably have a statement like this: connect to the name of the database user, the user ID using the password of that user. This user ID and password normally have to be defined. At the DB2 server side, this is by default. If you use the IBM Data Studio, all the entries in system DB directory and the node DB directory or local DB directory are done for you behind the scenes by this tool. This next chart shows both the client and the server and summarizes the charts previously shown. Note the chart is color coded, so for example my DB1 is in green and the chart shows the places where it is used.